Scientific breakthroughs over the last few years have led to the development of new drugs that were previously only imaginable in futuristic science fiction movies. In 2012, a young girl named Emily was dying of leukemia. So doctors decided to take a risk and use her own genetically modified immune cells to eliminate the cancer, making her the first pediatric patient cured of CAR T-cell therapy. And since then, hundreds of cell and gene therapies have been approved, with thousands more currently in development. But there's a massive problem. To save a life, these cells have to travel thousands of miles and survive impossible temperatures, all while beating a clock that never stops ticking. One single mistake renders them ineffective. This is the world's most fragile supply chain. To understand how and why the supply chain is just starting to negatively impact almost every single American, we need to understand why these drugs are so fragile and what the supply chain even looks like. Cell and gene therapies use living cells as drugs, so they really behave nothing like your typical drugs or normal pills that one would take. These therapies are known as autologous treatments, which is just a big word for the patient is both the donor and the recipient. So a patient's own cells are collected, they're shipped to a lab for modification, and then they're returned to be given to that exact same patient, a process that literally has zero room for delay. Every hour in transit works against the drug, so once it's removed from the patient, the cells begin to degrade. In practice, the cells often have to reach manufacturing within a day or two, or the cell count can fall too low. To give them the best chance of survival, these therapies are shipped frozen under ultra low temperatures, so often negative 140 Celsius, or for some Americans that'd be negative 220 degrees Fahrenheit, so absurdly cold. In CAR T cells, a type of cell that's used to treat and target cancer, is extremely temperature sensitive. So if they warm up even a little bit, they're basically no good. In any lapse, so power loss, broken equipment, or simple thaw instantly destroys the dose. I know this has all been fairly abstract, so let me give you a real life example. A few years ago, there was a lady that enrolled in an experimental study to use CAR T cell therapy. Her cells were taken out and then sent over to the lab to be modified. While they were there, she underwent something that is called lymphodepletion, which is a treatment used to deplete existing T cells to prep for the infusion of her new and improved cells. While her modified cells were sitting in a freezer waiting to be sent back, one of the employees over at the manufacturing company was tasked with cleaning that freezer. So the worker moved those new modified cells into a new freezer, cleaned the original freezer, and then moved them back. The problem was, after he cleaned that freezer though, he forgot to plug it in. Since the patient had already undergone lymphodepletion in preparation for the new infusion, her condition deteriorated really quickly and she ended up passing away. This is a very sobering example of the stakes involved, but also of a massive scaling problem on the horizon. As these treatments move from small clinical trials to a general public, the current chain is simply not prepared to avoid issues like this one entirely. To see why, we have to look at how the supply chain actually works and the dozens of failure points that are within it. So this whole process is called the cold chain, and it spans from the collection site at the hospital to the lab and back again. After the cells are collected, they're packed into dry shippers. These are basically high-tech refrigerators designed to stay at those ultra low temperatures that we talked about using liquid nitrogen. From there, the shipment is either hand carried or sent via specialized couriers to a manufacturing site. Obviously, you're dealing with drugs that are extremely expensive and fragile, so it's not like just mailing letters. These shipments often have to cross international borders, which means dealing with custom clearance, airway bills, and very specific labeling. I mean, imagine that your new and improved modified cells make it back to you, they go through the entire chain, and then they're accidentally given to somebody else. I mean, that would be tragic. So to try and prevent disasters, most companies now use real-time monitoring. They'll put GPS trackers and temperature sensors on the boxes so they can see exactly where the cells are and then how cold they are at any given second. But even with all that tech, sometimes there's not much you can do if something does go wrong. A flight delay or a misconnection can cause a box to sit out too long and then start to warm up. Maybe a paperwork mistake can lead to a customs official holding the package in a warehouse for a couple days. Even the packaging itself is actually a risk. These containers have to survive being vibrated on planes and the thermal stress of being incredibly cold on the inside while it's warm on the outside. Here's another real life example. So there was this research nurse a few years ago that was getting ready for an infusion of one of their patients. That patient's cells had made it through that entire cold chain. But when the nurse picked up the bag of T cells, she noticed they were excessively wet. So the team inspected it and found that there was actually a small puncture in the bag. Unfortunately, they determined that those cells couldn't be used because they didn't know the exact dosage. That little puncture had impacted in some way. So even if the transport goes perfectly, a small physical error at the very last second can still ruin the treatment. And while these stories are tragic for the individuals involved, I mean, one of them actually died, they're increasingly becoming a burden for most Americans, and most Americans have no idea. The fragility of the supply chain is one of the major reasons why these drugs are so expensive. Because there is zero room for error, companies have to build in massive amounts of redundancy. So extra freezers, backup samples, emergency couriers just in case something goes wrong. All that extra security and machinery makes each dose even more expensive than the treatments already are. Analysts estimate that manufacturing and transporting a single CAR T dose costs between $200,000 and $800,000. By the time you add in the hospital stay and the necessary follow-up, you're talking about more than $1 million. And these costs are starting to destabilize the healthcare economy. But the crazy part is this is just the beginning. Between 2016 and 2020, only about 2,500 patients received FDA-approved CAR T therapy, even though roughly 3,000 people were eligible for it every single year during that time. The gap comes down to high costs and the fact that most clinics aren't equipped to handle the complex shipping and storage of those medicines. For a company that offers and manages their own insurance plan for their employees or a small health plan, just one of these claims can wipe out an entire annual budget. To manage that risk, many companies are now using stop-loss policies and insurance payment plans. So eventually they have to raise premiums as these treatments become more common. Even if you never get one of these treatments yourself, you are implicitly paying for the supply chain's inefficiencies with your insurance costs. Unless some innovative advancements are made to this cold supply chain, these treatments will remain a fragile lifeline that the average person simply can't reach but pays for. So for the supply chain geniuses out there, this looks like a good business problem to solve and one that's probably very lucrative if you can do it. If you found this video interesting and you'd like to see more like it in the future, please consider subscribing. This is Tyler Dutchover. Thanks for watching.